Hello, welcome to the podcast from Duendelvin. I'm Taylor, and here we have Jeff and Kyle.
Hi.
Today, we will be talking about religion.
Dun dun dun.
Well, to get started, how are we going to be conveying today's topic?
That's a good question.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about post-affirmation under Hurricane law religion. So this is once the 9 races during the age of expansion, once the 9 races have agreed that the Horakai are the gods, this is the tenets of faith that the Horakai have put forward.
This was given to them at the affirmation.
Yes.
When they came together and they sat in front of the Horakai said, "We're gods," and the people were like, "Well, how do we worship you?" And that's when they released the tenets to the people, and they were to spread the word on how to properly worship. And Jeff, you got them. That's why they had the iPad.
And yeah, that's why we have the iPad, so I can get it all right. And we will talk about the tenets of faith of Publicon and Veritas Sanctus and Vagog and all of that in another episode. This one is the most dynamic, though, is this one. So,
Alright.
so we'll cover them one by one. There's 8 tenets of faith, and we'll see how far we get because there's covenants of faith as well. We'll see how far we get in the 30 minutes that we have, but we'll just cover one by one and talk about them as we go. So the first tenet is, it is an affront to the Horakai to fail in your proper worship of the gods. So, do you want to expand upon that?
I can expound a little bit. It's kind of self-explanatory, I think. They're pretty much saying, "Look, we just affirmed to you guys that we are gods. We decimated your armies. We put a demigod wannabe back in the box. We are gods, and to pay homage to anything else that claims to be a god would be an affront to us, and we would have to come and correct that behavior." No, everything that they talked about was, if you fail in this prospect, we will punish you.
Right.
There was no do this, and then, if you kind of wibble wobble, it's whatever. Nah.
No.
Nah. There is no wibble wobble.
This is a we live in fear kind of a world.
Absolutely.
And the first month of each year, and so just to recap in case, so that, you don't have to watch all the episodes to do this, which you should.
Definitely should watch all the episodes.
Should. But in Savarion, it's 400 days long, is a year. Each month is 40 days. Each week is 10 days long. And there's 10 months. So everything is broken into like a little more precision. So the first month, in week 1, you celebrate Theranik. Week 2, you celebrate Cataline. Week 3, you celebrate Elios. Week 4, you celebrate Zayak. And that's how you start your year in Savarion, according to this. And so it would be improper to not spend that month worshiping the gods. So
That's definitely how they expected it to be happening. They also, a lot of your preparation throughout the year is making sure that you have the resources you need to properly commit that worship. So when you're working, you're not like, you're paying a tithe to the church a little bit. If you want to, you can donate, but if you have extra, most of what you're doing is making sure that wherever you're choosing to perform those worshiping options, you're not having to go and work. It is an entire month of revelry and worship, depending on what god it is for that week.
Right.
So yeah, it is very strict, as you're not working. The only ones who technically are working are the vassal-arcs, the priests.
Right.
But they're just facilitating. And then there's also preparation for the feast, but it's done in a reverent manner. So like, there are exceptions and everything, because you have to prepare the feast and still prepare your function. But
well, this isn't
you're
quite the
not
same as like
getting paid for that purpose.
Jewish law on a on a Saturday, where it's like you're not allowed to work on the Sabbath, and so like everything is considered work.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're preparing a feast for the gods during that time frame, that wouldn't be considered work.
Because
So
You're not getting compensation for the effort you're putting in. You're doing
Right.
it for the greater good and for the worship.
Right. I'm a blacksmith. So for
Oops.
month 1, I don't do any blacksmithing.
Yep.
Period. So, and if I am a baker, I'm not doing it for
Compensation. Yep. And all this preparation that you do is to make this available so you're not taking an L during this month.
Right. But
Cool.
everybody does it, so it's
Yeah.
like it's just normal. So,
All right.
any questions on that?
I think we're good. What's the next one?
Okay, it is an affront to the Horakai. In case you have, it's an affront to the Horakai too.
Everything's in front of the Horakai.
To neglect those in your charge.
Ooh.
So that one has a lot of variables to it, and when we talk
Depending.
about the covenants of faith, we'll get into that a little bit more. But essentially, what the Horakai have decided was anybody that is considered in your care. So for my sake, my family, my wife, and my 3 kids are in my care.
If you have
Right.
a business, your employees are in
your
care.
care. Exactly. And so it is proper to take care of those people. And so taking advantage of somebody in your care would actually be an affront to the Horakai. To neglect them or take advantage of them or anything like that would be wrong and would be considered a sin. So,
Yep. I mean, that was pretty straightforward as well.
It's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Any questions?
Not really, actually. I was
Heck
thinking of
yeah.
something, but that was pretty much covered.
Heck yeah.
and Corbin is the man in our chair today. So if you have any questions, let us know.
Yep, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, all right, tenant number 3 is an affront to the Horakai to take a life without proper cause.
No, so doesn't say, hey, it's a sin to murder, period. It's
Or
like,
kill.
hey, yeah. It's like, hey, you can take a life if it's proper provocation. And this is going to kind of get covered when we get into the covenants. That provocation that's considered acceptable is going to be based on which covenant you take on. So this will be fun. And I mean, the Horakai were very intelligent in this because they left it vague on purpose. I mean, the Horakai, we built this,
I mean,
but
it's
yeah, they had years to plan this out. Though they expected there to be more of them, which would have been lesser pantheons, lesser shenanigans. But when there's only 4 left, oops. So it's very, very self-explanatory. Gonna kill? Yeah, make sure you have a good reason for it.
Make sure you have a
justified
covenant.
a covenant justified reason.
Justification.
Yep.
So.
My wife.
In some instances.
I had a better personality.
So
And-
the statement was, he stole my wife, but I have a better personality. Justified.
Beat up your freaking kid.
So.
Yeah.
Beat up my kid. I'm gonna seek
justified.
something. Yeah.
Right. So it depends, and it has to be justified, and it has to be justifiable to
somebody
a
else.
judge of that God.
Yep.
So, like, you can't just be like, "Oh, I'm justifying it." Like, you have to be able to prove in front of a judge who sees that God as their primary God
that it was a justified act.
that it's a justified act.
Otherwise, depending
everything's
on how they
just
choose,
willy-nilly.
Yep.
So,
So yeah, there is still a court system, and
Yes.
the laws are directly related to the religious structure.
Right.
Yeah, they're built one into the other.
and it would definitely be like, so how our legal system works is you have the offender and the offended, and then if they wanted to have a lawyer, somebody to talk to them and represent them, all that kind of stuff, and then you would have a judge who would determine based on the local customs and who the local customs followed and all that kind of stuff. But there is no jury of your peers.
Nope. It's the judge sees it,
Right,
and if you choose a judge of your you can request to be like, hey, I want to have this seen in front of this judge, and if the other person agrees, then yes, that judge will see the case, and if not, then.
But the judges
mediation.
everywhere in the world are chosen by the Vasilarchs.
Yep.
And so their ability to assess right and wrong according to the tenets of their faith and the covenants of their faith has been justified by those who are considered like the highest level. So essentially, like, a judge is appointed by the Pope.
Yep.
Would be the equivalent if we were in the Catholic world. The judge is appointed by the Pope. This is the same qualifications.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So the next, do you have any questions, Miss Tay?
on taking a life without proper cause, Corbin.
Not about this one.
Okay.
Well,
All right. It is an affront to the Horakai to violate the right of ownership.
This
So,
is goofy.
yeah, it's goofy, and again, we wrote it so that it was kind of open ended. But the idea is, it's not okay to steal.
Nope.
Um,
But the law validating ownership is based upon
Right.
covenant.
exactly. So it can be, if my tenant is peace and your tenant is, order, then the right of ownership might vary depending on.
Honestly, peace and order tend to go hand in hand, because in order to maintain peace and order, you kind of want the same thing. But like justice versus peace would be a little bit different.
True.
I see more.
Yeah.
More of this. So like some of the tenants will kind of work together, and you can see common ground between them, and then some of them are directly. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's true.
But it could be
Justice
like,
and
if
mercy
I see it
conflict.
as your family stole this from my family
I have
6
proof.
generations ago, I have proof of it. My tenant would say this is the right thing to do, and your tenant would say, but I own it and I have for the last 6
So to
generations.
maintain peace or
So-
maintain order, the order is that I've owned it, but you're like, but
It's just to give it back,
that's
and
just.
so
Whereas the same thing would be like, I own this now. This is the order of things, and peace says, well, I should let it lie. And so sometimes you can find agreement there, and they'll
Right.
be like, yep. And it was,
So-
and then honestly, yeah, it just depends on the.
but
covenants,
that's kind
which
of
is why it's written that way.
exactly.
wonderful.
Any questions on that?
Not on this topic, no. You guys are, you're explaining it pretty well.
You made it vague, but it's like really easy to understand.
Mhm.
Okay.
Left
Alright.
a lot of holes for loopholes, and I really like it.
So what Corbin
That was
said,
kind of the point.
I don't know if it picked him up. So Corbin was saying that he likes the fact that we kept it open ended with loopholes, and it's easy to understand and vague and awesome.
It's easy to.
I definitely paraphrased that.
manipulate and use for your
Yeah.
own
There's
Yes.
lots of
intentions.
wiggle room to make an argument make
Which,
sense.
because the Horakai aren't actually gods and they're dirtbags, and they
Dirtbag.
they wanted everyone to worship them. Getting people to fight over whose tenant is right keeps you kind of out of their business.
Yep. You are
So-
still paying homage and worship, but definitely staying conflicted and not unifying.
Right.
Hey.
Yeah.
Okay. It is an affront to the Horakai to lie for personal gain. So it's not wrong to lie
Nope.
unless the purpose of lying is personal gain. This one doesn't have quite as many loopholes and caveats. Actually, the next,
You could find
like the bottom 4, don't as much, but I mean, it still could be.
Your covenant could kind of change what you consider personal gain.
Right.
And that's the difference, is what is attributed to personal gain.
So, any questions on that one? I feel like that one in itself is kind of straightforward.
Extremely straightforward.
Alrighty.
Or they just like switch cheese.
Yes.
Yes.
Consult the cheese.
Consult
Okay,
the
so
cheese.
what are we at? 1, 2,
The
3,
cheese.
We
4,
just
5,
did lie for personal gain, so now we're
6. So the tenant number 6 is it is an affront to the Horakai to unjustly break loyalty.
if they have not given you a reason to violate that loyalty. I think Taylor's glasses just broke. There she goes. Fixed. Temporarily. Sorry. So if you pay homage to a empire, and that empire has not done something to violate your allegiance to them, you cannot break that allegiance. If you swear an oath to somebody and they have not done something, a violation of one of the tenets, to justify you breaking your oath, you are locked in.
Right.
So there's no just I don't want to.
I don't want it doesn't fit unless
Well,
you have a valid reason for
yeah.
it.
If you have sworn an oath.
Yep.
Because if you're like, hey, I'm going to come over for dinner tonight, and then you're like, I don't want to. That would be different than like, hey, I'm going to be loyal to you the rest of my life as my spouse.
If you say something like
Right.
I swear on my life that I will be there for dinner, is that
That would be
You made an oath, and if you break
oath.
it, yep,
You have to.
But if I were to say, I think it'd be fun to come over for dinner tonight,
that's not an oath.
was not an oath. So
To make an oath is not done lightly because the gods will punish you for failing.
for breaking an oath,
You don't make oaths and take them lightly. They hold sway. Marriage holds sway. Allegiance holds sway. Like even promises of payment. That's an oath. You have
Right.
entered into an oath. Like so, the way you don't like, hey, I promise I'm going to pay. You make that statement, you're paying. If you violate that, or if they change the deal on their end, then you have absolute access to break that oath.
right?
So like if
If they're like, no, I want 10% instead of 5%, you could be like, well, that's a you broke the oath, so I don't have to honor it.
Yep.
And so in that situation, because of the unjustly breaking loyalty, if one party is at fault for it, the other party is not.
Yep.
No matter what the circumstances.
You can't.
If
both be
you
at fault.
broke the oath, I am not bound to it anymore. Period.
And this is where the covenants come into play too, because it can get kind of spoofy a little bit. So you
Kinda
got to make
spoofy,
sure
right.
that your covenant is oath bound in a way that is going to
Right.
hold.
But I mean, you could play games with that. So like, let's say you owe me money, and it's like, okay, on the first day of the month, I will collect that money.
Mhm.
Or let's say the 5th day of the month,
Yeah,
I
5th
will
day.
collect that money. If I come on the 4th day to collect that money, you could logically, if you followed
Order, because they
Kettling,
or Kettling, yeah.
Kettling or Zayok, either one, you could be like, this breaks the covenant of Kettling because you're coming a day early. You have broken faith. I no longer owe you any money.
Elios would be the hardest one to follow and follow all the rules because that will give you the most wiggle room because you're being merciful.
Right.
Mercy is a very interesting sword to play with because it'll
is.
hurt you just as often. You're not using a double-edged sword, you're using a two-headed sword on both ends, and if you
Right.
stab with somebody else, you're stabbing yourself at the same time.
We can get into mercy, but mercy has actually got the most wiggle room.
Definitely good call on that, Corbin.
So
Also, yeah,
okay.
we won't have enough time today. We're gonna have to go into the covenants another episode.
Looks like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's our timeline, Corbin?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. Yep.
Yep.
Cool. Well, let's finish the tenets, and then we'll
Any questions, Tay, on that tenant?
on breaking loyalty.
Let's go to the next one.
Okay.
It is an affront to the Horakai to forego your divine purpose. So yeah. So we talked about, if you want to know divine purposes, go back to the
races.
race episodes. Each one has their own divine purpose, but you have a divine purpose, something that you were created to do. And so the Horakai used this to manipulate the races into believing that they were the reason. But when they were created by Parbucon and Veritas Sanctus, they were given a divine purpose. So
This one,
not
yeah.
honoring that divine purpose.
And it doesn't matter which covenant you fall into. There's
Right.
not a way to really say, "Oh, hey, I'm not following my divine." Like,
Right.
you can't wiggle this one.
Right. And that really was for the purpose of saying, okay, we're
gods.
actually gods because we want you to honor what we created you to do.
Dirtbags.
Very dirtbag. But intelligent, smart.
Absolutely.
I mean, nobody is ever going to say that the Horakai aren't smart in the way that they operate things. I hope.
Yeah. I mean,
We're trying to design it so that the Horakai are dirtbags, but also very intelligent about it.
intelligent.
Intelligent
Cold
dirtbags
and
are
Calculated
scary.
dirtbags.
Yep. Yes. Those kind of dirtbags are scary.
dirtbaggy, but you can also be intelligent.
That's true.
Yes. Any questions?
Ultra.
No.
Okay.
And finally,
The last tenant.
it is an affront to the Horakai to seek racial isolation or elevation.
This was necessary during the affirmation because you were taking a whole bunch of people who have lived up to this point isolated. Even though Horakai, when they scooped them up and then committed the fall and then the rebirth, they still brought them back into isolation. And then during the affirmation, they were like, well, the land's broken, bros. You got to get together and work together. And it's probably the greatest accidental thing they ever did. Fully awesome. because it forced them to follow the laws and not divide. Now, granted, we have major characters in history like Beorn Mantuer, who violated that tenet and then spent the rest of his very long life in a redemption arc where he had to pay for the crime of Minotaur supremacy and executing some Gatu. Yep. He went skinning cats, bro. It was
Oh boy.
which
But-
is funny because he's called Mantuer, and the man didn't even hate humans. Bro went cats.
Should have been Beorn Cat Chewer. But
that does not sound as
yeah,
good.
no, it doesn't have quite the ring to it. But he did that with a group of soldiers. He went around and, demonstrating that Minotaurs were... And so
Yep.
his penance for that was...
For the rest of his life.
For the rest of his life.
And if he violated that,
spending...
he'd get
redeeming.
Horakai smote.
Yep.
Came close.
And then he ended up smoting the Hork.
Yeah.
Sort of. He was on the team that ended the Age of Expansion.
Was that the guy who didn't give you a backstory?
Yep.
So yeah, the backstory on that is when you live for a certain amount of time, he had 500 years of history, and he gave us half a page, I think it was a quarter of a page.
This was early on when we were testing
Very
the role
early,
playing game.
yes.
But
And I was tasked with giving him a backstory for punishment purposes. So we turned him from this happy-go-lucky Minotaur into, I have a very dark, sordid history of racism.
and now I'm redeeming myself. Okay, I think we definitely have one more episode.
Oh yeah, possibly two,
But, yeah,
because
we'll
we
see.
get to cover the Covenants next.
So, with that, we'll call it a day. And don't forget to
Like, comment, subscribe.
share, subscribe.
Yeah,
Check
share it
out
out.
the Kickstarter.
Go to the Kickstarter.
Definitely go to the Kickstarter.
Go to it through Savarion.com. Go to Savarion.com. That's the easiest way to find it. Click on Kickstarter. Go to Kickstarter.
Don't forget the race quiz.
Take your racial test.
Take your racial test.
Take
That's
your
also
racial
fun.
test.
Find out who you pay homage to. What race are you? Start
We don't
building
have
your
paying
strategy.
homage to.
You're
We just
right.
have which race we are.
Which race do you belong to?
Send
Yeah.
it to us. We'd love to see what race you are.
We would
Absolutely.
love to see who
Drop
you're
it in the
part
comments on the YouTube. The YouTube. Drop
The
it in
YouTube.
the YouTube.
All right.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.